It's often said that, before the MCU started and raised the profile of the entire Marvel Universe, the Avengers line of characters weren't really that recognizable within pop culture. Don't get me wrong, the Avengers characters were always important within Marvel Comics and its fictional universe, but they were not truly popular with mainstream audiences or the general non-comic book reading public. Prior to the MCU, Marvel's most popular characters were, by far, Spider-Man, the Hulk, and the X-Men, especially Wolverine. But given that the movie rights of those characters were being held by other Hollywood studios during the 2000s, when Marvel started their plans to produce their own film adaptations, they had to use heroes that they still fully owned. And the first character they decided to use was Iron Man, who went on to become the face of the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe, and ever since 2008, Iron Man's popularity has increased exponentially. In order to make him more recognizable with general audiences at the time, and as a means to give the character more exposure, Marvel also started development of an Iron Man animated series that was meant to coincide with the release of his first live-action movie, a series titled Iron Man Armored Adventures, a CG animated show that reinvented the millionaire playboy into a young teenage genius inventor, a depiction that greatly differed from the character's usual comic book lore, but that still managed to respectfully reinterpret these concepts in a way that maintained what made them compelling in the original source material. So today I'd like to pay respect to this often overlooked adaptation and explore different planned ideas as well as many different characters that never got to appear due to its eventual cancellation. Even though Iron Man definitely wasn't one of Marvel's most popular characters before the late 2000s, he still received some recognition outside the comics and had already gotten some adaptations in other media. For instance, Iron Man got his own animated series in 1994, a show that had a more traditional depiction that tried to stay closer to the comics, and it aired during a time where a lot of other Marvel characters also got their own animated series that also attempted to be faithful adaptations. In contrast, Armored Adventures decided to make a big twist on the concept by focusing on a teenage Tony Stark. During a 2009 interview with series writer and showrunner Christopher Yost, who was heavily involved with the conception of the series, he said that the decision to reimagine Tony Stark as a teenager came as a way to introduce Iron Man to a new generation in a manner that could capture younger audiences and introduce them to his corner of the Marvel Universe, though he clarified that their goal was to make this reinvention feel both accessible and also a recognizable translation of his comic counterpart. What's kinda funny about this is that this wasn't even the first time that we had seen a teenage Iron Man. During the 90s, Marvel released an event called The Crossing, where they introduced a younger teenage version of Tony Stark, and he even briefly replaced the main Iron Man in his own comic book title for a while. Years later, during the first miniseries that the character received for the original Ultimate Comics lineup, it was said that that version of Anthony Stark had been operating as Iron Man ever since he was a teen. And even during the present day of Marvel Comics, starting in 2023, they launched a new Ultimate Universe, where Tony Stark is once again a teenager and straight up calls himself Iron Lad. So the concept of a teenage Iron Man is something that Marvel has contemplated many times already, and Armored Adventures wasn't the first time it happened. Even though the Iron Man movie released in 2008, production on Armored Adventures actually started before Jon Favreau's live-action adaptation had begun its development. The show was mainly produced in collaboration between Marvel Animation, French studio Method Animation, and Indian studio DQ Entertainment, with Lux Animation handling its post-production. This was a very well done display of what could be done with CG animation on a TV budget at the time. And while the animation itself is a bit dated by today's standards, I think that its art style did age pretty nicely in my opinion, since the decision to use cel shading really complemented its aesthetic and comic book designs, giving its world a more stylized look. Throughout its 2 seasons, the show managed to adapt a vast number of Iron Man's rogues, as well as many classic storylines from the comics, such as loose adaptations of Armor Wars and Extremis, It had a serialized format that allowed us to follow more closely how the characters progressed, and giving us well-realized character arcs, like the Living Laser, who went from a sympathetic villain who misplaces anger towards Iron Man, to eventually becoming his ally after realizing that he was the only person that was trying to save him, with the Living Laser even being willing to sacrifice himself to save Iron Man, although he did make more appearances after this.
Then I get this power and I use it to try and hurt you. The one guy who wanted to help me.
But you saved me, Arthur.
Yeah, imagine that. I'm the guy who saved Iron Man.
I also appreciated how they juxtaposed Tony Stark's and Jean Con's journeys, and how they built up their friendship before their inevitable fallout. Both Jean and Tony are young geniuses that are trying to claim their family's legacies. Tony is trying to regain his father's company from the hands of Obadiah Stane, and trying to rectify his father's past sins as an arms manufacturer by saving lives as Iron Man. Jean, on the other hand, is trying to lay claim to the Mandarin identity from his stepfather and take leadership of the Tong organization. It's a nice reinvention of the character that does differ a lot from the Mandarin of the comics, but they did a great job with fleshing out his backstory and motivations, making you engaged in his journey and recognize the conflict within him when he eventually betrayed Tony, Rhodey, and Pepper. Armored Adventures lasted for 2 seasons that aired from 2009 until 2012, and while no official statement has ever been given on its cancellation, if we take a look at the context surrounding Marvel at the time it was being produced, I think it can give us an idea as to why the series didn't continue. The series started development before Disney's acquisition of Marvel, with the merger being completed while the show was still airing on TV. In 2010, Marvel appointed Jeff Loeb as head of the newly created Marvel Television, a division of Marvel Entertainment that originated as a way for Marvel to start creating shows with a more direct involvement in their production, and it led to changes being made in the Marvel shows that were already being produced by other companies. This merger with Disney and restructuring of Marvel infamously led to Avengers: Earth's Mightiest Heroes being cancelled in 2012, in favor of creating a new Avengers show that stayed closer to the character's portrayal in the MCU. Armored Adventures was also cancelled in 2012, and even though it wasn't replaced by a new Iron Man show, I personally believe that these internal changes in how Marvel handled their television projects might have had an impact on the decision to not renew Armored Adventures for a 3rd season. On 2013, a year after the show had ended, Newsarama conducted an interview with series producer Megan Thomas Bradner and Brandon Allman, who worked as a writer and story editor for the show's 2nd season. They discussed the series' development and some potential ideas they had planned for the show's 3rd season had they gotten the chance to continue. They mentioned how they wanted to focus on Tony, Rhodey, and Pepper going to college, and them balancing their personal lives with their superhero activities, to see them handling the consequences of their secret identities being revealed to the public during Season 2's finale. They also wanted to use Pepper as rescue on more stories, and mentioned some Iron Man villains they considered using for the future, such as Mauler and the Raiders. And related to this, they also revealed that the Raiders almost got to appear during Season 2, since before they decided on doing the Iron Man 2099 episode, their initial idea was to create a story featuring the Raiders as its villains. Of course, they ended up going with the Iron Man 2099 idea instead, and this episode ended up serving both as a homage to the Marvel 2099 comics, and also Iron Man 2020, who was an Iron Man called Arno Stark from an alternate possible future. Brandon Allman mentioned that they also wanted to use villains from the larger Marvel universe, like the Skrulls and even Galactus. He also mentioned other guest heroes that they wanted to use for the series, like Thor, the Fantastic Four, Wolverine, and Captain America. What's funny is that all of these heroes that he listed were actually already confirmed to exist during some episodes throughout the show itself, since the series had many name drops and Easter eggs that expanded on their version of the Marvel Universe. Captain America is the clearest example. During the 16th episode of Season 2, not only did they mention both Red Skull and Hydra, but the story also revealed that S.H.I.E.L.D. had recovered Captain America's body and were keeping him alive while they were searching for a way to revive him.
S.H.I.E.L.D. recently discovered him, floating frozen in the Arctic Circle.
That's Captain America! Everyone knows who he is!
He fought in World War II against the Red Skull and Hydra.
Every other hero that Alman mentioned during his Newsarama interview were also basically confirmed to already exist on the Armored Adventures universe. The series mentioned adamantium multiple times, for example, and given that there was an episode that introduced mutants, it's reasonable to think that Wolverine was already out there somewhere. The episode Control-Alt-Delete name drops Thor.
Hey Pepper, your info on this legal deal going down looks about as real as the time you saw Thor at the mall.
I did see Thor. He was eating meatballs at the Norwegian food stand.
And in the 11th episode of Season 2, Tony Stark mentioned that he wanted to attend a lecture given by Reed Richards.
Oh no!
What?
That Reed Richards lecture at the university? Deadline for tickets was yesterday. Richards is a science genius. I've been looking forward to his talk for weeks.
There were also mentions to Invisible Woman and the Baxter Building on other episodes, pretty much confirming the Fantastic Four's existence. However, there were a lot more unseen heroes that were basically confirmed to exist in this universe, well beyond the characters that Brandon Allman mentioned in his conversation with Newsarama.
Spider-Man!
Nope, just your friendly neighborhood Hawkeye! Make that not so friendly.
The vast majority of these name drops and Easter eggs happened during the show's second season. Episode 12 mentions Dr. Hank Pym, alluding to Ant-Man of course. Armor Wars name drops the Punisher, and they referenced him again during episode 21.
Black Knight escapes scared out of his mind. The question is, who's taking these supervillains down?
My guess is one of those vigilante hitmen, like the Punisher.
What if it's the competition?
That same episode also mentions Matt Murdock.
So Matt Murdock has agreed to represent Killer Shrike. So what?
So, according to the news, he's convinced Shrike to reveal everything in exchange for a reduced sentence. Everything meaning me!
Episode 6 references Iron Fist, and the next episode has Pepper comparing how the Ghost looks with Moon Knight. And even though he's not a hero, during episode 8, Doctor Doom actually name-dropped Dormammu, so it's reasonable to think that Doctor Strange also exists somewhere in the Armored Adventures universe.
Insolent worm! You want real power. This is an alien from the dimension of Dormammu.
As mentioned previously, this series introduced the X-Men during Season 2, showing Tony and his friends helping Jean Grey as she's being hunted down by Magneto, with Professor X eventually showing up during its ending. Beyond these three mutant characters, the show also referenced Dazzler as a famous singer that was going to have a concert in New York City, confirming the existence of yet another character from X-Men comics. Speaking of mutants, during the Newsarama interview they also mentioned that they consider using Cyclops for the X-Factor episode, and he would have shown up alongside Professor X at the end of the story when he recruited Jean Grey. Besides these planned ideas and characters that they wanted to use for Season 3, there's also some plot threads that were introduced during the show's run but that were left unresolved, and it's safe to assume they most likely would have been addressed had the series continued. During the show, we saw hints of Tony and Pepper having feelings for each other that they had issues in confessing, and in the series finale we finally saw them acknowledging this when Tony kisses Pepper's cheek during a conversation. So it's likely that Season 3 would have shown them in a romantic relationship. Another unresolved plot thread is what exactly happened to Madame Mask. In this show, she was reinvented as being the daughter of Obadiah Stane, with her being childhood friends with Tony and even having feelings for him. But later on in Season 2, once her father gets exposed for being evil, they showed her blaming Tony for resulting in Obadiah Stane being outed as a corrupt businessman and criminal to the entire Stark International Board of Executives, resulting in Obadiah being fired, losing control of the company, crashing out in a huge meltdown, and ending up in a coma. This escalates until the episode Ironmonger Lives, where Madame Mask impersonates Obadiah by using the Ironmonger suit and tries to kill Tony, but she eventually gets defeated. She was seen being taken into custody by S.H.I.E.L.D. after she was stopped, but the end of the episode showed that she had actually escaped by disguising herself as a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, so we might have gotten to see what happened to her on a possible Season 3. The ending of the 12th episode of Season 2 also teased the return of Rona Burchill, aka the Mad Thinker, since she was last seen being taken away to the Ravencroft Institute by a doctor whose eyes turned red, implying that she was an android, much like Rona's brother earlier in the story. This villain was based on the ultimate version of the Mad Thinker, who was also a woman. Another interesting thing that you might be thinking is what they were planning to do with the introduction of all these different heroes, since one would assume that they were maybe even planning to create their own version of the Avengers. And this is actually something that Nick Fury did allude to during a moment of the show itself.
You know, when you turn 18, you could be a big part of a team I'm putting together.
Thanks, Fury. But I'm not much of a team player.
Well, whatever you plan to do, son, just remember, S.H.I.E.L.D. could always use you.
In the end, while Iron Man Armored Adventures may not be as talked about or remembered as much as other short-lived Marvel shows from its time, like Avengers, Earth's Mightiest Heroes, or Spectacular Spider-Man, it was still a pretty good series that reinvented Iron Man in a fresh new way while still respecting the character's core essence, in a similar way to how X-Men Evolution managed to give a younger spin to its characters while still being faithful to the source material. Personally, while I wouldn't be against seeing some kind of continuation for Armored Adventures, I do think that Iron Man definitely deserves to get a new animated series solely focused on him, whether it be a revival of this old show or a completely new adaptation of the character, especially since he's much more popular than he was back then. And I know that there's a modern preschool CG show, but that's a completely different sort of thing. What do you think though? If Marvel decided to produce a new Iron Man animated series, would you like it to be a completely new adaptation, or would you prefer to see a revival of Armored Adventures set sometime after its second season? And what are your general thoughts on Armored Adventures and the planned ideas that they never got to do? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And, as always, thank you so much for watching.